In this lesson, we are going to learn how to debug a Docker-based application from VS Code using Docker Compose. So first we need to download the project. If you want to download a sample project, it is here in this particular URL, github.com/jettyexpert2015 Spring Boot Debug. Once you download the zip file from here, you need to extract it and place it in a particular folder and set it up in VS Code, which I have already done. So here I have my Spring Boot Debug application and it has two sample files, the hello world application and the controller. Now in the controller there are two methods. One is display default message. If I hit the URL of this application, by default this would be invoked, and if I append /hello, this method would be invoked. So this is a sample application. So the first thing that I need to do is to clean and install this particular application. Let me clean it from VS Code, and also I'm going to install it now. Perform a maven install. Now clean and install is done. Now there are two important files I need to have a look. One is the Docker file and another is the Docker Compose file. So if I open the Docker file and the Docker Compose file together, first, if I have a look into the Docker file, it's a standard Docker file. We are using OpenJDK version 8. And finally, what we are doing at line number 6, I'm copying the jar file which is generated inside the target folder due to the maven build. If I see here inside target, due to the maven clean install that I have performed, specifically the install, this jar is created. And I'm going to copy this jar as Spring Boot debug.jar. I'm exposing port 8080 and 5005. This would be for debugging purpose. And finally, there is this cmd command, which would be performing a Java jar command using this Spring Boot debug jar. Now here, if I only run the application via the Docker file, I need to provide this option so that when the application is up and running, it would be running in a debug mode and it should be using this particular port. But as I am going to run this using Docker Compose would be using this Docker file in turn. But if I go to Docker Compose, this is a standard structure. What I have done here, I have the services named Spring Boot. The container name I have provided, it could be anything. Now ports I have exposed which are same, and under environment I have provided the parameters for debugging. Now one important point here is at the end I have address equal to 5005. As I am using JDK 8, it is equal to 5005. If it is JDK 9 or any other version above that, it should be equal to *:5005. Now if I go to this readme file, here I have all the comments listed out. So first two are for Docker file, which I don't need because I'm using Docker Compose. If I perform Docker Compose up build, then the image would be created and the container would be run after that. So that I can do manually from here in the terminal. Let me perform a clear screen and append, and I can type in this command and run this. But another option, as I am using Docker extension over here, if I click this, I have all these options: containers, images, registries, etc. So what I can do, I can go to Docker Compose, I can perform a right click on this particular file, and there it provides multiple options: compose down, compose restart, compose up, select services, etc. So I can run the compose command from here also. I can use the features of Docker extensions. Anyways, let me continue with the command which I have already pasted. Press enter. The image creation and the container creation after that is in progress. Let's wait for a minute or so. Now you can see it is listening at address 5005. The application is starting. Let's wait. And you can notice on the left hand side, in the meantime, we can see the image, the containers, etc. If I go to my Docker desktop also, in the meantime, let me go there. If I go to images, I have the image created. If I go to containers, I have the container created. It is in running state. Let's go back to VS Code. So the application has started on port 8080. Now I want to run it. Let me hit the application URL, press enter. Now what has happened? I have run the code and I have hit the URL. So the application is working fine. Now I need to debug it. So in order to debug, what we can do, let me go to run and debug. I have a sample configuration, run configuration already created. What I can do, I can click on open launch.json, click this gear icon. Here I already have a sample configuration. In case you don't have it, you can click over here, create a launch.json, and there you need to provide input like this. What is the input? See, these are typical type, Java, name, any name you want to give, request attach. This is important, host name and the port name. As I am debugging it locally, it is a local host and the port is 5005. Now let me go to a particular file, maybe this controller, and place a breakpoint over here at the first line and run this in debug mode. How? Go to run and debug. Make sure that this particular configuration, right, which we mentioned is selected, and click this button, start debugging, or you can press F5 also. You can notice that the bar at the bottom has changed its color, meaning the editor is now running in debug mode. And I'm going to hit the URL once again. Go back to Explorer. I'm just appending one value to the URL, test docker compose 123. It's waiting. The breakpoint is hit. If I go back to my VS Code, you can see this is the value of the parameter that is reflecting over here. Now we are able to successfully run the Docker container using the VS Code and able to debug the program successfully.